got a finicky cat that doesn't want to eat cat food, so.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
That's a weird cat.
The dog will eat it. I don't have to buy dog food. I just let him eat the cat food. So he's kind of getting a little meowish. What
Anyway, I
was
also got
that last one you showed? Because I missed the last one.
my favorite
okay,
study
yeah.
Bible. Love this
Yeah.
thing. I've been using the PDF version forever, and I just don't like using PDFs. This guy, Kurt Rudolph, Gnosis.
Oh man.
And then I got some of the ones from the
or
last.
something?
No, I just kind of went on a book buying spree to build my collection and start reading some more stuff. Then I got what was the Gospel? Charles Talbert. That was one of the ones Dr. Price recommended. That one was used. And then I got the Otto Eisfeld book, but look at it. Came in 2 pieces.
Oh, that's the introduction?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, because I had some hand scans that I did of the book copy I had. It was about this really nice hand scanner from Reed Iris, I think it's. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but.
Oh, so you can just make PDFs out of stuff quickly?
Yeah, I can either scan it to JPEGs directly, or I can scan it to individual PDFs or other, I think, formats. But that Eisfeld book was really good to hand scan because it's got wide margins, so you can slide it across and get it without messing up the text. I tried that with the 5 Gospels book, but their margins, they had notes and stuff that went all the way to the edge of the page, and then after a while I gave up on hand scanning it, and I ended up scanning the whole thing on a scanner bed.
Oh, gotcha.
But one of the advantages of being one of the chief Bible geeks is people buy me stuff. So this is, I don't know if I showed you this last time. Richard Purvo.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is very influential for the Jesus Seminar. They almost accepted just about all his theories on Acts and its fictional nature. Yeah.
Have you read,
if you want to
sorry.
Oh, if you basically want to know what the Jesus Seminar thought, you could probably read that book and get most of what they came to.
Okay, I'll add that to my list.
Hey, yeah, if you guys get a second, type in, the chat so people can see the book list, right? So, because some of these I haven't even read. It might take forever, but...
Nah, we're elitists. We're elitists. We don't want anybody to have the same knowledge we have. Gnostic. We're the Sukukoi, or maybe no, those are the other guys. You guys have any Culvers? I'll put that in the chat. They're famous for Butterburgers.
No, never heard of them.
That'll slam your arteries shut. You could probably hear them slamming shut when you eat one of those. They're good though. They have some good burgers. Went to had to do some volunteer work for us for the kids band, raise some money. So I had to go for an hour and supervise the kids, and they would take the trays of food out to customers and stuff. That's all they had to do. They didn't take any money or anything like that. But when I got there, they had so many people that I ended up just eating and talking with a student teacher there, which was cool because I'll be student teaching in March, so it's good to know some of the things to expect.
Oh, yeah.
That was a good one. Yeah, so let me type in for those who are interested in the chat. The book I was showing, The Mystery of
those look real good there, Doug.
Yeah, Kevin Seagain, if that's right, recommended the 2 Barnstone books to me, which I've just been flipping through them. I just got them today, but great introductions and just a great resource of having a bunch of the Gnostic writings, and then in the Gnostic Bible, I think there's practically everything in there that's identified as being for sure Gnostic, and then the other Bible has Gnostic Gospels, Dead Sea Scrolls stuff, Visionary Wisdom texts, Christian Apocrypha, Jewish pseudepigrapha, and stuff from the Kabbalah. So just great resource books. Yeah,
that's a really good eclectic version of all those texts, and handy to have it in one spot. So yeah. For electronically, I think I was talking earlier, I have two versions of the Qumran sectarian works. One of the versions has an English translation in it. Up to that point, I only had print versions. The one by Giza Vermesh, and another one that was popular. And I ended up getting both those electronically as well as the English translation I had for the complete Dead Sea Scrolls in English. Then I spent like $1,000 and some to get the complete set of biblical scrolls and fragments. So now I've got all the biblical texts, and I've got all the sectarian texts, two versions of that. So I can go crazy on the Dead Sea Scrolls if I want.
Wow.
Yeah.
So to get
it was worth it.
Collection of everything, it's going to cost you.
Oh yeah, it would cost a lot more than what I paid for the electronic versions, and it's all searchable and stuff. So.
Sorry to interrupt, Doug. You have the sectarian and English versions in the eSword DVD I sent you.
Oh, awesome! Thank you very much.
It's in Bible format, so you can search the Hebrew words, and then there's a copy of the. I believe that copy of Dead Sea Scrolls came out of the Mormon translation. I believe the Mormons did a translation of Dead Sea Scrolls, right?
That I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard of that one.
All right, you got something in there. Just dig through all that stuff. It's in there.
Okay, cool. I will. Thank you again.
Yeah, I like the old eSword better.
You mentioned that Mystery of Acts. Have you read Paul the Apostle of Jesus Christ by F.C. Bauer? That was one of the ones on the live Bible Geek with Dr. Price that he recommended. It was like a seminal work on Acts. And
I don't think I have. I might have that a version from archive.org or something, electronic version, but I'm pretty sure I haven't read it.
Okay, well, I was just curious that I haven't read that or Mystery of Acts. I was wondering how they compare as far as their approach.
So
that's a good question.
Doug,
you should look into it.
Yeah, Doug, I'm a moron. The Gnostic Bible, I've already been through that. I was kind of disappointed in that, and here's why. It was kind of like a survey of a lot of the different belief systems. Like, it wasn't a total conclusive, absolutely conclusive. Like, I got all excited when I seen the cover, and I read through it. I just forgot the name because it was a while ago. I read through it, and I was kind of disappointed. I'm like, oh, man, this isn't the whole collection. So, actually, having both, I did get the Nag Hammadi library, the revised and updated translation, Nag Hammadi scriptures.
Oh, okay.
And that was really helpful because you can bounce off, with who was it, Marvin Meyer and Aileen Pagels, and James Robinson. You can bounce off between the two texts. Like this Gnostic Bible, I got all excited. I was like, all right. Well, it's mainly a survey from all the Gnostic groups. So you get a wide range of literature, but it's not all inclusive, which was kind of disappointing when I got to that part and I thought about it.
Well, for me,
is that revised version also by Robinson? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to step over you.
Oh, that's all right. Go ahead.
Is that also by James M. Robinson, the revised?
No, that's by Marvin Meyer.
Oh, okay.
And James Robinson. Is that what you just asked me? No. I'm getting my authors mixed up. I'm sorry. This is why.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Google Hangout dudes that are reforming their evil ways and trying to actually communicate without being totally messed up.
Yeah, I think the one by Barnstone and Meyer, the one you're talking about, the Gnostic Bible, will probably be a good starting place for me because, like you said, it's a more shallow end of the pool, wide survey of the variety of Gnosticism. Seems like that's what I was told anyway.
Yeah, like the reason why I found out it wasn't all conclusive was when I had to look up something and there was some text, I forget what it was, and I got going through it and I'm like, wait a minute, it's not here, it's supposed to be here. And then like I read it and but it was good. The introductions to each of the belief systems on the different sects of Gnosticism were excellent. Very good explanations and background history.
So you can see that this is the version I have, the electronic version. I think this is 1978. And this is just by Robinson, or general editor anyway.
How many translations have there been of the Nag Hammadi works?
I don't think a lot. But yeah, it's good to have the entire collection in one spot too, because there's a lot more that, you know, there's Thomas, which some, like Dr. Price pointed out a few Hangouts ago, is not strictly speaking 100% Gnostic. And there are other things that, you know, they don't even know how to classify some of these works, you know. Are they Gnostic? Maybe not. Who knows? Kind of stuff. So it's good to even have, you know, from Plato's Republic, I think. There was found in the Nag Hammadi collection, I think a section of the Republic. Wow. So, you know, it's cool to have everything.
Yeah, that's neat. Anyway, I also got, I just ordered it, History of the Synoptic Tradition, which is Boltmann, his book on the Synoptics, which is supposed to be really good too. Dr. Price recommended it, and then I had heard other people say it was really good work. So I'm going to have a lot of reading to do.
Yeah, so far I have more reading to do than stuff I've read, obviously.
Oh, me too, by far, yep.
Yeah, by a long shot.
I'm trying to see if there's publicly available English translations of the entire Nag Hammadi library.
I don't know. There was some website, naghammadi.org or something like that, I used to go to for.
Was it gnosis.org?
Yeah, they had quite a few of them.
They have the Apocalypse of John, Gospel of Thomas. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, they do have a lot in here. I don't know if it's everything.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff for Logos Bible Software, but I'm surprised at some of the stuff that I don't have. Like, I was looking for if I had the Ascension of Isaiah. Well, it's in multiple parts. They consider the first 5 chapters as strictly Jewish, and starting with chapter 6, it's Christian. So I have, you know, Old Testament pseudepigrapha and apocrypha and stuff, so they include the first 5 chapters, but I do not have the Christian part. So for that, I had to go to you know, a website to find that.
So was it? It was expanded on by Christians later on. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, apparently they took a Jewish work and then tacked on a second part to it where Isaiah is taken to see Jesus in heaven or something like that.
Christians would never do that to a Jewish work.
Nah. Never touched Revelation or anything like that.
Yeah, and they certainly didn't try to influence like the textual variations of the Songs of Solomon.
Yeah, I have this. I'm looking through the index of the other Bible, and I don't have the Ascension of Isaiah, but I had the Martyrdom of Isaiah, and then a bunch of the Odes of Solomon.
Yeah, exactly. The Martyrdom is the Jewish part. So yeah, you only have the first 5 chapters.
Okay. Does the Christian part have a separate name?
They usually refer to that as the Vision of Isaiah.
The Vision. Okay. Now, what's the Ascension? Is that just the 2 parts together, or is that something else?
Yeah, usually, from what I've heard, it's usually been referred as the complete work as the Ascension of Isaiah. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can't wait to get into all that stuff. The thing is, I got so many at once, I don't know where to start.
Yeah, I have the Nag Hammadi library by Robinson in PDF too, apparently. I didn't know I had that. I'd never referred to it because I used the Logos version.
I'd love to just sneak into your house and make a copy of your hard drive, John.
Well, some people have gotten a lot of my archive, but I didn't say that.
Well, they did it without your permission.
No, they did it with my permission. That's why I don't want to say anything.
I was gonna bring up. We did. Reuven is part of this thing called the Noahide Nexus, which is a Torah study hangout. And the parsha for last week was what was it? Reuven, Deuteronomy 24 or something. It was the part about where it talks about following the commandments, and this, this is what will happen if you don't. I think it was. Hold on, let me look up the parsha and I'll find exactly what I'm looking for.
I'm thinking this PDF of the Nag Hammadi library that I have is actually a newer version than the one I have on Logos. But there's no copyright information, so I can't tell. It's a real nice print, though. Very readable. Jeez. Nice.
Okay, so it's Kitavo, okay. Yeah, which is... Anyway, there's a real interesting thing that... Because I'll read along as they're reading through the Torah portion. Yeah, thank you, 26, okay. And I always read the commentary in the study Bible, and there was something I wasn't sure if you guys probably already had heard about it, but I had never even realized the connection. Let me find exactly where it's at.
Were you looking for the blessings and the cursings? Where they start? I believe they start in the blessings start in chapter 28. If that's where.
That far? I thought they were started in 26.
Yeah, the blessings and the cursings are in 28 to 29, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Yeah. So 28. You're right. 1 through 68. That whole section. This whole section of Deuteronomy follows very closely to, I'll just read the commentary. The consequences of obedience or disobedience, blessing or curse. The covenant specifies a series of blessings and curses that follow upon national obedience or disobedience to the law. These are modeled after ancient Near Eastern state treaties in which the consequences of breach of the treaty are spelled out at its conclusion. This chapter has several close parallels to the Basel Treaty of Esarhaddon, which I don't know if that's how you say it, a Neo-Assyrian treaty dating to 672 BCE. So it got me thinking, I wonder if the whole format in Deuteronomy here between the blessings and the curses is basically kind of just use those documents or that format in Deuteronomy.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay.
Certain sections.
Yeah, it's been around a while.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm a total newbie, so I'm probably bringing up all this stuff that you guys already
No,
know
that's all right.
about.
If you read Ancient Near Eastern Texts relating to the Old Testament by Pritchard, it's an older versions of Ancient Near Eastern literature compared to Old Testament. Oh, treaty format, very amazing. Even in the first part of the Law Code of Hammurabi, there's a small section of cursings and blessings. You know, if you do this or that, then these things will happen. So there's even certain sections in Numbers, as I said before. You know, so like if you actually look at it that way, even the start of Deuteronomy, um, it starts to lay out this whole treaty format. So think about it this way: there's two ways of looking at the belief system. In Noahide Torah study, we're looking at it from the Noahide or Jewish tradition, reading the Jewish commentaries on how they would view the literature.
Right.
Viewing it in context of, say, a secular view, yes, it very much, you know, if I was Jewish, I may not look at it that way because I want it to be unique to my belief system, you know, as a contract. Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, I know what you mean. That's why I did not bring up this commentary in that hangout because they're looking at it from a devotional perspective, and I didn't want to bring in stuff that was critical.
Yep, but you're right on with that. That's pretty sharp.
Well, it's not. I didn't notice it. I was just reading the commentary, and it surprised me.
Yeah, if you asked that in the Bible Geek group, probably Dr. Price would probably tell you who was the first one to think of that the core of Deuteronomy was a vassal treaty. I know that was formulated a while back.
Well, the other thing is, it seems like Leviticus and Deuteronomy is like an updating and revising in large part of Leviticus. Does that seem right to you guys, or am I way off there?
Also, the theory that it might be the other way around, that
really
that it's an expansion of some basic things laid out in Deuteronomy.
So the Leviticus or Deuteronomy would have been a source text for Leviticus.
Yeah, if it started off as like just a vassal treaty, a core, there was the myth of Moses tacked onto it as outer layers. There was also other things that were tacked onto it and expanded into close to what it is as we have it. At that point, the Deuteronomic history became then a foundation for a writing of the Torah history.
Okay.
So the Moses myth was expanded on and so forth at a later date. So Deuteronomy and the Deuteronomic history came first, and then were expanded into the Pentateuch, Hexateuch kind of thing.
Oh, because I was always under the impression that Deuteronomy was like a later stage of the Torah, but yeah, I don't know. So
yeah, if you want to take a radical point of view, yeah, you could. Aliens did it. Yeah, it's just the theory, because I was thinking about Deuteronomy, or what it was in Kings, I believe, when they're talking about Josiah's reforms, that they found a book of the law. I was thinking that that's not a reference to Deuteronomy, but rather they discovered the Torah, which is the book of the law, even though it's multiple scrolls. It's, if you're referring to the law, you're not referring really to Deuteronomy, you're referring to Torah. So I was thinking that was a way of legitimizing a new product that came later by backdating it into an earlier period. Just an intuition I had.
Yeah, that makes sense, because what you're doing is you're implementing the old and with the new, and reinforcing your reform around a document that everybody was more or less familiar with. Then if you say it comes from Moses, it even has a pretty good punch,
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm thinking, okay, so they have Deuteronomy, or parts of it. They have a history of the kings of Israel and so forth that stem from that, the Deuteronomic history. Then they get to the point where they're becoming independent say like around Hellenistic times. So they send a lot of the sources, not the full Pentateuch, but the various sources end up in Alexandria, say, and that's where they actually put them all together into the Pentateuch, where we have all the different sources. They're redacted and done first in Hebrew and then translated into Greek. And that forms like a nationalistic epic, similar to what other nations had at the time, in promotion of the Maccabees and that kind of stuff. Again, not something I've really worked out. Can't cite you chapter and verse yet.
There's this other interesting commentary on, there's a parallel between Leviticus 26:19. It says, I will also break down your pride of power. I will also make your sky like iron and your earth like bronze. Okay, and then we go into Deuteronomy 28:23, and it says, the heaven which is over your head shall be bronze, so the sky like bronze, and the earth which is under you like iron. So there's a swap between the brass and the iron and in relation to the sky and the earth. And then it also, the commentary here says, here's a quote from the Vassal Treaty from Esser Hayden, or Houghton, however you say it. May the gods make your ground like iron, just as rain does not fall from a bronze sky. So, I mean, that seems like it's almost lifted directly, whatever that means. But it's weird that there's a switch in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, that they switched the adjectives there. And we were discussing that last time, but no one really, there was no commentary from the Rambam or anything on those passages and what they meant exactly.
What's interesting to me, though, is that would be examples from, what, Assyrian vassal treaties?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and how do they end up in post-exilic times as the core of Deuteronomy? That's an interesting kind of conundrum there to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it says, this section echoes the treaties that the Neo-Assyrian Empire imposed on its vassal states, suggesting that the curse section of these state treaties, perhaps an Aramaic translation, provided a model for this chapter, because Judah was a vassal to the Assyrian Empire.
I suppose that's reasonable.
Yeah, and both Neo-Assyrian and Judean officials spoke Aramaic.
Yeah, it's something they brought with them from Babylon, because they were collecting the records from the previous empires that they conquered. The Syrians collected records from the peoples they conquered. Mm-hmm. So they had, libraries of material that they could have drawn from. That's probably where a lot of the bits and pieces of actual history end up getting into the Old Testament, is because they basically had access to a lot of different collections.
Speaking of this, real quick, speaking of the Assyrian collection, wasn't there a time in which the biblical scholars concluded that the Assyrians didn't necessarily exist, or am I thinking of some other particular group that was mentioned in the Bible?
Must be a different group, because I think the Assyrians definitely existed.
Yeah, I think one of the groups that were mentioned and they didn't know about were the Hittites. I knew that for sure that they were mentioned in the Bible. But there might have been the Assyrians. There might have been no evidence for them too. That kind of rings a bell too to me.
Yeah, this was during the 19th century biblical scholarship, which they combed the land per se, and were attempting to find evidence and archaeological information of the Hittites and whatnot. They combed it, they couldn't find anything, and somehow they came across this huge library of what looked like Hittite literature, and they finally found it. They finally found what they were looking for, particularly. I mean, they weren't looking for a library per se, but after a while they stopped looking and they found something to reaffirm the existence. So it was the Hittites. So it might have been the Assyrians. I'm not entirely too sure, but I now do remember it was the Hittites. It's been a while since I've actually engaged in like Judaic ancient history and whatnot.
That's how I find shit. I stop looking for it, and it turns up. Yeah, that works for me too.
Hey, I'm wondering if he's talking about. Are you referring to the Rosh Hashanah library that they found? Like that's Canaanite literature.
The
Oh, what?
Ugaritic stuff.
Was that the Canaanite literature?
Yeah,
I
Rosh Hashanah. I knew one was found there, but I'm not sure if that's the same. You know, it could be.
They had no idea about the Ugaritic. That was like a total surprise. They had no idea that those people even existed.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, like were the Ugaritic actually named in the Bible? I don't remember if they were or not. Again,
No, I don't think so.
it's been such a long time since I've actually engaged in the subject of Judaic studies. You know that I've forgotten a lot of it.
Yeah, as far as I know, no, they weren't mentioned.
They were Canaanites.
Even so, they would have been ancient. Even if you accepted the actual time frame of Abraham, they would have even been ancient by then, I believe. I'm going to say goodnight to my kids, so I'll be back in a few.
Okay.
So since we're sort of discussing, or rather the topic is when did Moses become an historical figure, I have to ask, like, has anyone here bought D.M. Murdoch's book on that? I never actually got around to buying it per se. I meant to buy the book a while back, but I never just got around to it. And after a while, I just got so sick of going through the same information over and over and over again that I just simply left the topic in and of itself. I'm mainly rejoining these types of studies just to stay sort of informed and new information and sort of grasp what other types of things are being talked about and discussed, as well as sort of just brushing up on all the information that I just kind of forgot.
You're talking about did Moses exist? Yeah, okay. No, I haven't read that. I actually haven't read any of her stuff yet. But it seems like
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't either.
Seems like as far as I know anyway, which isn't much, seems like Old Testament minimalists are just basically saying that Moses was totally mythical. So are we asking when did he become considered historical by Jews, ancient Jews?
Yeah, that is a topic that was posted here.
Hmm. Reuben says, I know someone goes so far as to say Ezra invented Moses or that Ezra too was a myth.
I wouldn't go that far. Like, my particular guessing is that Ezra was probably responsible for gathering all the source material, which was then utilized and compiled into what we would call the 5 books of Moses, and then later on edited through various other sources into the latter books and whatnot. That then became like these histories of Kings and Chronicles. But I wouldn't say that Ezra invented Moses. I would say that Ezra is probably largely responsible for the sources that came together that created Moses inevitably.
So here's a question, really quick, and on the topic. Could mythics who believe, maybe Jesus didn't exist and he's, a figure, can the same techniques that used to form Christ in the New Testament also be used to form Moses? I would say yes.
Yeah, it's possible for sure.
All the techniques that we use to prove maybe Jesus didn't exist in the New Testament that mythics write about could be used to see if Moses existed or didn't. You know, so maybe what we learned about the study of Christ, we can take that and apply it to Moses and see what we come up with, you know?
That's a possibility, although I don't particularly gravitate towards mythicism. And by the way, the pronunciation is mythicism, just so you know, Wingman. But it's quite all right. Don't worry about that. I have never really heard of that particular proposal. Like I've heard the proposal framed along the lines of that Jesus is a mythical character in the same vein that Moses is mythical, and I don't particularly agree with that statement wholeheartedly, although there is some validity to some of the arguments they have made if they sort of stay away from addressing apologetics. That's kind of one of the big problems that mythicism has kind of run into, is that they usually address apologetical arguments for the historical Jesus, which attempt to make Jesus into this divine, superhuman being in history, which necessarily I would disagree with wholeheartedly. Even most actual historians and not apologetics of the historical Jesus would probably agree with in many ways. But I would have to hear that particular case and judge it upon its own merits, as well as ask a couple of questions here and there. And unlike most people who believe that Jesus was an historical person, I'm not so quick to dismiss mythicists right off the bat, because, to be quite frankly, like if you actually read books of Jesus Criteria and the Device of Authenticity, you'll find that there is a whole crapload of problems with the methodologies of the historical Jesus studies. But yeah.
John Wayman was asking, can the same techniques and methods used by mythicists to arrive at the mythicist position on Jesus be used to make a judgment on Moses? Is that basically right, Wayman?
I would imagine so. Dr. Price talks about New Testament minimalism, where he wants to apply some of the Old Testament kind of form criticism, that kind of stuff, to the New Testament. So I imagine it could work in reverse. But the thing is that in scholarly circles, that Moses didn't exist probably, or as a myth has been long accepted. It's not anything new. It's new to pew potatoes, but it's not new to anybody that's familiar with critical scholarship. And that started with the rabbis. They first realized the problem of, wait a minute, Moses couldn't have possibly written that. And then they opened up the bottle. They let the camel nose under the tent. So it was only a matter of time before a lot more was being questioned.
And what is particularly hilarious about that, more or less, is that the apologetical effort to sort of defend the historicity of Moses largely relies on accusations of anti-Semitism. Such as saying, well, Frederick Strauss was an anti-Semitic, and the German higher critical scholarship was largely riled up in anti-Semitism and so forth. And some people have even tried to go so far as to link the influence of anti-Semitism in German critical scholarship to that of Hitler. So there's Godwin's law right there. It's just kind of funny, the types of defensive strategies of cognitive dissonance and apologetics will try to utilize to sort of deny any sort of critical inquiry as to the existence of the beloved biblical figures.
About a year ago or so, there was a discussion about that in the Bible Geek listeners, because I had come across people that were claiming that mythicists are anti-Semitic because by denying the historicity of Jesus, who was a Jew, you're opening the floodgates to anti-Semitism. That, if it wasn't for Jesus, the Holocaust would be going on again or something. I guess that's the reasoning.
appeal to consequentialism is what it is. That's the logical fallacy being employed there. I always find that particularly hilarious because, growing up, I never really understood why it is anyone would engage in such crass distinctions between race. I even thought that people who were really sort of prejudiced against Jews, for whatever reason, I didn't even know what Jews were, but I thought that the prejudice against them was just purely crap. I didn't believe in any of it. I didn't particularly gravitate towards any of it. In fact, I outright rejected most of it, or outright all of it. But it's fairly interesting to see sort of such sentiments taking a rise, really. And if you would, I would say this probably more or less is an attempt to sort of deflect any kind of criticism away from the historical Jesus by referring to various modes of emotions. I mean, why else would they refer to the Holocaust if not to evoke an emotive response about the idea that if Jesus is no longer in existence, then the Holocaust might happen. Ooh, cue the fear drums and all that.
I think those defenses just show that you hit them where it hurts, and they're just resorting to attacking the character of scholars and scholarship because they can't address the arguments.
Yeah, it's like a desperate play.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of points that are being scored because a lot of this stuff was not ever refuted. It was just ignored till it went away. It's a lot more difficult to do that kind of thing nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially with the advent of the internet, definitely. I mean, but then again, academic blackouts are a lot harder to fight against than media blackouts. I mean, with media blackouts, all you have to do is continually keep up the pressure, continually keep up the voice until eventually the media is forced to address you, like what happened with Occupy and various other contemporary controversies happening now in unrelated forms of activism. But with academic blackouts, it's kind of harder to engage in, just simply due to the fact that, for all intents and purposes, the individuals sort of create sort of a niche field of cultural relativism within their framework, and what they utilize with this is that they have sort of cultural motivations to keep the historical Jesus coming about, and that sort of seeps into the academic framework and how one pursues it. I mean, I'm an atheist, so I don't have any particular cognitive or cultural institutions towards not examining their framework of whether or not Jesus was an historical character, but neither will I engage in anti-Semitism. But I think there is some validity to the idea that the scholarship of mythicism might be utilized to bolster claims of anti-Semitism, specifically those that actually have quite a lot of prejudice against Jews, while at the same time holding towards a mystical sort of form of Gnosticism per se. And what I'm referring to is of course the radical forms of Gnostics, which is kind of strange really, because you would never think that Gnostics would be anti-Semitic, but they exist and they utilize mythicist theory. So I think that fear is valid to a degree, but it's not so much to the idea that it's going to cause a Holocaust.
Yeah, I think too the fear is, if one part of our biblical literature is thought to be not correct or made up, after hearing it so long in some circles that the whole thing is absolutely true and none of it can be wrong, that fear is like, oh no, if all of a sudden Jesus is, a made-up character, then what about the rest of it, So I think a lot of Christians want Jesus to be Jewish, but not too Jewish, because why be Christian if, Jesus was completely Jewish, you know what I mean? So they're okay with him and studying Jewish roots and all that, but not too much,
Have you guys
Yeah.
heard Richard Carrier wrote a blog post a while back about, he was saying that he doesn't think non-professional scholars should be publicly engaging in mythicist debates or discussions, because he says that it's still a concept that has to be settled by scholarship before the masses should discuss it. What do you guys think about that?
They'll never settle that question.
That's what I was thinking. What do you mean?
What really has force in society is popular interest and opinion. You know, we're driving these scholars by paying them to be able to write about this stuff. They're never going to
buying their books. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're gonna respond. This issue wouldn't even come up if it didn't become a popular issue. It would have stayed in the hallowed halls of academia, and we'd never have heard of it. So it's not just these guys all of them seem to be elitist except for Dr. Price.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give the guy a robe and let him walk it around as king for a day. We're the ones buying his books and paying for his bread and water.
And he's not even the worst of it. There are some scholars that are so blatantly, they look down on their audience. We're their target audience. They're writing popular books for the educated layman that we're supposed to be, but then they disparage us and look down on us. It's really
I don't really want to name names myself, but I feel like that's half the case with D.M. Murdoch. Like, if you read her books, but you don't agree with her wholeheartedly for some reason, she looks down upon you. I've even had to sort of engage her on Facebook when she was attacking a Muslim, and I was saying, wait a second, let's back up here. Whatever. Let's sort of clarify positions instead of attacking one another, And here's the position that this Muslim seems to have against you, Is this what you agree with, or is this what you disagree with? And most of the time, I'm able to diffuse such a situation, really. And the same goes with other areas too, as well. And then but if you don't agree with her on other issues regarding mythicism and the importance of mythicism towards its impact on religion, for some reason she talks down to you in a very cynical manner. I've been subjected to that. And then there are, of course, people in the Bible Geek group specifically that act as veritable fanboys for her work. And those people irritate me more so than Murdoch herself. Murdoch I can kind of get a pass because I can understand why is she so upset, because she's been harassed and she's been harangued by radical apologists such as J.P. Holding and Keith Thompson, and accusations have been flown around about her being a part of some sort of worldwide New Age conspiracy theory and all that stuff. This kind of stuff, this type of reaction that she has towards criticism, I can understand. But in no way, shape, or form should her fans start reacting like this, and should her fans start being as aggressive as they are. Like for example, I was removed. I specifically kind of removed myself from the forum per se. But when I was told that I cannot defend Carrier from being a sexist, simply by saying, whoa, wait up, hold on a second, let's go ahead and address what Carrier says and what he's actually doing towards Murdoch, and let's examine to whether or not that is actually sexist. And I was told I can't do that. I was like saying, okay, well, if I can't do that, I'm leaving this forum. You're literally censoring my ability to be able to discuss this in a very critical and in a very nuanced manner that examines that maybe Carrier isn't really hating against women, maybe he just has a problem against Murdoch, which might be understandable if we sort of address some of the reasons. And his reasons I don't consider valid, but for just because I'm more familiar with Murdoch's work than he is. But the reasons he would give if you hadn't read Murdoch's work, you can kind of see his point of view and his perspective, really. But yeah, that's one of the issues that I sort of have with some of these people who sort of react negatively towards the user base. I don't want to bring this back to video games, but it's kind of like what's going on with Gamergate in a way. Video game developers are now sort of, or rather, games journalists specifically are now denouncing their own fan base. Yeah, and You know, if you go on like various sites that send the traffic towards those games, you can see how that kind of worked out for them. Not very good.
I think there's a lot of problems that are going on. It's not just elitism. It's not that they're, you know, you can even look at different people, and each one of them have their own particular whatever it is, you know. So I just would like to see people get along, because I think that they have a lot to offer each other, you know, if they would only give each other a chance. But it seems like things just get out of hand, you know. You start to respond in kind, and you've probably seen this in Hangouts and stuff, is that, you know, if somebody is goofing off and you goof off back with them, and then it ends, you know, it accelerates, it gets out of hand, and then there's no more communication. So I just think that all mythicists should get along with each other, because they are under attack collectively. Uh-oh, I'm going to have a cat fight. Hey!
You're talking about getting along while your cats are fighting?
Yeah, they really like the Hangout. Cause,
one's a historicist and one's a mythicist cat.
Yeah, I think the boy cat that was sitting up here is really interested in the Hangout, and that's the female that came up and decided to just mess with him all of a sudden. Yeah, the other problems are like sexism and stuff. I got a notification from Richard Carrier's blog that he created a blog post which was a collection of stuff that's been going on while he's traveling. So he just had a series of links, and a lot of it has to do with some of these atheist guys, leaders of the atheist community that are being accused of rape and sexual impropriety and sexism, and not realizing that they're even sexist and stuff like that. So I was reading some of that today, and there's, you know, like Carrier's coming heavily down on the anti-sexist side, and then, you know, a lot of these people, in the same way that these other people are sexist and they don't even realize it, I think, you know, Carrier might be able to fall in that same category too. I don't know. I think I like Carrier for the most part, but I think that he doesn't possess a great deal of imagination. Put it nicely like that.
Well, I have more of a problem with his historical elitism towards mythicism and towards other areas, anything else. So, like for example, his article that he wrote, and I have it in Homer, Bible, Hitler, and you know, all that stuff. And I read it, and it was referring to the idea that history before 1950, before the 1950s, is bunk. And on that point, all I just have to say is that you do realize that there are a ton of medieval and Renaissance history that actually came out that is still fairly valid, that hasn't been analyzed today, and that still may necessarily be very valid because it hasn't been sort of reanalyzed. And a lot of this stuff is very esoteric. In fact, some of the more esoteric aspects of history have not been re-examined after the 1950s, you know. With regards to textual criticism, that's always being advanced, but with certain other areas of textual criticism, some of it isn't even addressed. You know, and not only that, there's also the fact of his acclamation of don't read any other mythicist theory that I don't approve of. You know, it's like, really, you are actively engaging in the application of censorship of academia, of the humanities, mind you. That is far more disgusting to me than like anti-sex feminists advocating for the censorship of art because they find it sexist and all that stuff. But you know, with the sexist thing, and this is the only point I'm going to make after this, and you can go because I see you want to say something new. The reason why he's doing this is because he's a part of a particular group of atheism called Atheism Plus. And if you're not familiar with that, and probably the viewers might not necessarily be, the history behind it is literally that there was a particular group of atheists on free thought blogs, specifically concentrated there, that didn't want to advocate for like secularism and various aspects of humanism. that had Christian allies, specifically Christian allies. Like, for example, they didn't want to advocate or be in an activist rally with a Christian that was advocating separation of church and state beside them when they were like pro-choice, for example. But if you actually understand the nuance of human thought and religious thought and politics, it's like they wouldn't really, while being pro-choice, they wouldn't be actively pursuing this idea of abortion, making it illegal because there's for separation of church and state, so that would be kind of contradictory. I mean, you can kind of get into discussion with them specifically about whether or not they would want to make abortion legal, and just ask them up front about that. But dividing yourselves into because you don't believe what I believe 100% of the time, and that's how atheism plus came about. It's literally an intolerance of differences, of philosophical and sort of ethical differences with theists that they might have on one frame or the other, or on one frame, agreements on one thing, while at the same time having disagreements on another thing. That's what it's about. And that's why Kerry is going around doing that shit.
That's where I'm safe being agnostic, because I can just say I don't know. I find all this stuff interesting, but I don't need to be a part of all the splinter groups. It's excellent. I can even listen to the theory on aliens, find it a little bit humorous and enjoyable, but I'm not part of that group,
Well, neither am I in particular, because I myself, I'm an agnostic atheist, strong agnostic, weak atheist specifically. But I don't like those particular splinter groups either. In fact, even growing up as a kid, being a gamer myself, I didn't really like the console war dick fighting. Now, I never understood, well, why would you be for for the Super Nintendo or the N64 and be against Sega Genesis? They both have great games. Stop fighting and fucking enjoy it. That was my mentality growing up, all throughout the entire time. I never understood this sort of infighting, this divisiveness that people have to have. It's either 100% my way, or you're a bigot, or you're a racist, or you're anti-Christian. It just doesn't make any sense to me. But then again, I grew up on George Carlin, and one of his stand-up routines was where he would start talking about similarities, and how differences divide us, and that was probably more or less my greatest influence in life. Differences divide us, similarities unite us, and I think we should start talking more about that than anything else.
What do you guys think about the second half of the topic, the possibility that Moses was a pre-Israelite creation or story?
That Moses was pre-Israelite, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that was one of the second parts that on the topic that Ruben posted, saying, and is his story Moses pre-Israelite originally?
Wrong!
I'm not actually familiar with that particular topic to actually give any kind of viewpoint on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. What would that be, Ruben? Like, was he a Canaanite figure? Is that what you are getting at? Possibly?
Yeah, because I've heard several theories about where Moses might have come from.
Now, see, now that's tough, because this is what you run into when you start talking about stuff like the early tribal league in Joshua, where he's trying to unite the tribes, and a lot of the difficulties they had, even having tribes show up for war. So towards the end of Joshua, he says, choose you this day. Christians love it, but choose you this day who you'll serve. As for me and my house, he's saying, as for me and my tribe too. So me and my house doesn't necessarily mean his house or his wife and, met his tribe. So there, here we need a national identity to not only be sustained in the rough and tumble ancient Near East, because everything was terribly slice and dice. The Sea Peoples were coming in, and they had a hard time forming coalitions amongst themselves. Even the Song of Deborah, it shows that some did not show when they should have. Things like that. So that's why they went to kind of like a kingship. And I think at the time when the Babylonian Empire came and took them over, and the whole issue of who are we and how do we form a cohesive national identity, and under what guise do we do that? And how do we link ourselves today to a historic past that carries that national identity with it in order to have all the tribes and every single person not only be committed to the cosmic order and the sacredness of the land and everything, but also to the identity of the leader that would bring them out to form a cohesive nation. We see that happening today, nation building and things like that. So the national identity is huge. So I guess if you find the answer to at what point did Israel, these early Hebrews, have a national identity, you'll find the answer maybe, because I think Moses is definitely included in that. So now you have some questions of authorship. Like you were saying before, was Deuteronomy written before or after? I think the epic goes. I'm with the scholars that I know me and Felix here disagree a little bit, but that's okay. The Deuteronomistic history goes from Deuteronomy to 2 Kings. I'm not too worried about that. At the same time, when Joshua, the tribes seemed very fragmented. Judges, they had judges. Everything is very fragmented. But here you have the Torah in the first 5 books where everything is cohesive under Moses, so to speak. So that's interesting there. So
I've always wondered if Judges is just completely fictional, with recounting an earlier time, examples of all these different leaders, moral lessons, stuff like that. Do you think it's reflective of the time of the writing that Judaism was more?
No, I'll tell you why. Since the Deuteronomistic history runs from Deuteronomy to 2 Kings, those writers who are writing those texts have political motives to see how the tribes acted who weren't under kingdoms. So you had pro-kingship writers and anti-kingship writers.
All within
battling it out politically. And if you see that in the literature, you can be like, I'm reading this. Now, why would they say that? Why are the tribes and judges so fragmented and everything? And then you get to the part, because they had no king. Oh, okay. So the leaders, even though they did their best, they were heroes. They were so fragmented, and that's that's from my side, anyways, from what I got from reading.
Well, also the context of this is sort of the war going on between the north and the southern kingdoms of Israel per se. That's by and large what the sort of context that Kings and Chronicles particularly follows under.
Sounds like somebody's been reading Richard Elliott Friedman.
Who, me?
That just sounds like something he would say. I was reading his one of his books.
Well, I did. I think I do have one of his books. I'm not too sure. I'd have to check in my library specifically. It's been a long time, but yeah, I do. Yeah, I am actually. Now that you mention his name, I can remember. Wasn't he the guy who wrote the sources of the Bible revealed or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the book I was thinking of is Who Wrote the Bible. I think that was the name of that one. Because what Wayman was saying reminded me a lot of what Friedman was arguing.
Is the argument basically that like Israel and Judah or Judea were kind of polemically getting their points across? In other words, that judges would be kind of a pro-kingdom or pro-king system because they're making the non-king factions seem like chaotic, basically.
Well, you had the say if it was in today's world, the conservatives and the libs, the Democrats and the Republicans, they all want to make each other look bad. But then the writers, they had to put it in the cohesive format for national identity. How do you do that? That's tough. So so the writers of Kings, very hard on the actual kings. Oh, they spill all the beans. You want to know all the dirt? Chronicles, they clean things up. So, you know, that's just from some of the authors I've read. But I guess even in Samuel, here he speaks out against Saul. Like he gives, Israel wants a king. You guys want a king? And he gives a big long speech about why they should not have a king and all the horrible things the king will do. You know, he'll draft your young men and all this. You'll be taxed, and he'll raise an army, and so that's a big speech against what was Samuel. Samuel was from the prophetic kind of. So then you have two branches of government. You have the religious caste, or the prophetic caste, or the judge caste against the kingship. Now have to share power with the temple. Oh, it was a mess. That's why Saul looks so bad. Actually, Saul united the tribes, fought against the Philistines, and actually held the tribal league together. Meanwhile, he's getting shit from Samuel. You know what I'm saying? And every time he came back, he's like, "Wait a minute, you're not following the laws of the Torah and this and that, and so you're going to get beat up in the next war." And Saul's like, "Oh, come on,
Reuven was saying that I'll just read what he wrote. According to the Torah, each of the tribes had 4 or 5 kings, in quotes, among them. None of them were led by just one man. 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel are referred to as 1 to 4 kingdoms in the Septuagint. So they apparently knew to group them, says Reuven. Now, do we know that much about the how the political climate, and as far as it was the Northern Kingdom that was kind of anti-Davidic for a time. Is that right, or am I getting crossed up? Was that Judea?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So since they were against a king, like how do we know that much about how their regional politics and stuff like that were managed without a
just a little bit of nuance here, so you don't get your geography mixed up. Always remember, the Northern Kingdom was actually in the south, and the Southern Kingdom was in the actual north. But for some reason they called it. For some reason they called the one in the north the southern, and the one in the south the northern. Okay.
Well, Kingdom of Israel was north of Judea, right?
If I remember correctly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, Reuven says they were not against a king, just against a united monarchy. And I guess Egypt was the northern thing.
With Israel, wow, really bad form, I guess.
So we could maybe classify the kingdom of Israel as being more minimalistic when it came to the scope of the king's power.
Yeah, there was also competitions for holy sites, because once the kingdom was split, you had huge competitions. So whoever controlled that, whoever controlled the temple. So the northern prophets, they used to beat up fiercely on the southern prophets. They give them a pounding. And you read stuff like I don't know, what is it? Amos. And some of those prophets that come out of the northern side gave them a pounding. So
now, when did the kingdom split exactly?
Ooh, good question. I don't know exactly.
Reuven says, there were a couple dynasties in the kingdom of Israel. However, every man had to fight for his throne, usually killing his predecessor. King Omri was the most successful, and the Assyrians referred to most of the Israelite kings as the house of Omri, even if they have no genetic connection to him. And he says that Omri killed 2 rivals to become king. And Reuven speculates that Omri could possibly be the basis for King Saul. Interesting.
So you'll read a section in Judges, I think it's in Judges, where the tribe of Benjamin, where the traveler sleeps in the square, and the men of the city attack him, kind of like in Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
And they divide the maiden up into 12 pieces, and they attack the tribe of Benjamin and almost wipe them out. The tribe of Benjamin, that's an early knock to where King Saul would come from. King Saul came from the tribe of Benjamin. So that's another slap at, Saul, in a way. And, it's interesting, like when you're reading it, think about, okay, how are politics coming into this, too? It is fascinating what you'll dig up.
Yeah. Seems so basically the different writings in the Hebrew Bible, we can see the political war, quote unquote, kind of playing out a little bit. They're taking pot shots at each other, and finally, when the different sources all got brought together, we end up with these, different views about kingly rule and stuff like that.
Right, and on top of that is the teaching that we get when we read the literature. It's sacred literature. We don't like to think about sacred literature being that political, but man, it is. You read 1st and 2nd Kings, tons of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious from reading the Hebrew Bible that, especially the post-Torah stuff, that, I mean, you can't really separate out the politics from the spiritual, devotional stuff. It's just, they're just completely married together. Today we have secular societies where we can keep religion and politics pretty much in separate sides of the court. But man, back then, I mean, you're dealing with basically divine right of kings. I mean, they were not separated at all. So yeah, it makes sense that you would find politics and religion as if they were one thing. I mean, I wonder if they even had a conception that they could be separate back in that time. You know what I mean? Like today, we all take it for granted that they could be 2 separate things. But I wonder if they were even, if that idea to them would be completely alien.
Well, what would happen is the kings would just ignore the priestly caste.
Yeah.
And they would do their own thing, like Solomon. He does all the alliances. King Ahab does all these alliances. oh, the prophets wrote against him like nothing. Anything he did, he could do no right. And so then they pay for it in the literature deeply. Like if Solomon was here today, he'd be like, what did I do? He'd be like, why are all the Republicans writing against me, or why are the Democrats not passing anything I do? And I'm always looking like terrible in the literature or in the history. And he took a pounding, and especially I think that's what was huge, because the priestly caste was so fearful of assimilation of other nations that they almost had to have alliances in order to survive, because they passed up those alliances because the priestly caste, would always be preaching against it. They took a licking a lot of times from other nations, terrible beatings, just from the anti-assimilation policies of the priestly caste.
So you could say that Solomon issued a lot of executive orders.
Yeah, and Saul too. Like when King Saul brings back, he's supposed to destroy everything, and then Samuel from the priestly caste says, "Hey Saul, why do I hear bleating of sheep in the courtyard?" He's like, "Oh, I brought them back as a sacrifice to the divine, to God." And he's like, "Oh, you were told to wipe everything out, to kill him." But if you look in ancient Near Eastern literature, and even with the Greeks, those were war trophies that you would sacrifice to the god. You might even hang their shields in your holy temples, as tribute to the gods. You might sacrifice their horses on hecatombs and burn them for thanks to the god. It's amazing. Like once you see the full context, but it wasn't done the Hebrew way, and they were so worried about assimilation that hey, you bring these people in, you didn't kill them, our people are going to marry them,
Not to change the subject, but John's cat looks really interested in our Hangout right now. He must be a higher critic cat. So anyway, kind of getting back to the Moses thing, yeah, I think, and I'm woefully ignorant on the history of the relationship between Judaism and Canaanites. I mean, this stuff that I've seen is basically that there seems to be a connection between Yahweh and Elohim, or El, right? But I mean, there's not any stuff about a Moses type figure in any of the Canaanite writings, as far as I'm aware. So it seems like that to me, just based off of what we do have, probably Moses was an Israelite, either creation or possibly person, but I personally doubt he was a historical figure.
Well, I got to take off. Excellent discussion. I'll see all you guys later. I loved it.
Okay, cool. See you, Wayman. Good talking to you, man.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
That's what happened. Don't bother to recap. I'll pick it up as we go along.
Oh, we were just yeah, Wayman had to run. We were just talking about some of the political aspects of some of the writings, reflecting disputes between the northern and southern kingdoms in regards to their approach to having a unified king or a unified monarchy, stuff like that. And then you can see the different views playing out in the writings.
Yeah, if you get a chance to read Freeman's book.
Yeah, I'd love to. Which one was it? Who Wrote the Bible? Or
Yeah.
a different one? He talks about
He goes,
some of that stuff.
he goes into great depth about the political situations between the northern and southern kingdoms, and how that played out in various aspects of the Bible, not just the content, but style, things like that, all kinds of stuff. some of the polemic. I think you mentioned that earlier. That
Yeah.
there's a polemical feeding off of each other.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely a good read.
Would you also recommend the Bible with Sources Revealed? I've heard people talk about that, but
Oh yeah.
okay. Now,
Yeah, it's,
I mean, because I bought the Eisfeld book. I mean, I don't want to get too much of the same stuff. You know what I mean? Do I have to worry about that with the Sources Revealed book?
no, not really. It's more of a modern. It follows kind of like a different, slightly different lineage. All
Okay.
stemming obviously from Wellhausen, but there was like a split in emphasis. Because when you look at Eisfeld and if you look at that PDF I sent you, there's no redacting. It's just the sources, you know.
Right.
Whereas Friedman and modern scholars believe that there was levels of redaction. Yeah, more than one.
Yeah.
And then there's like objections to that. Oh, you know, you guys have too many redactors and stuff like that. So there's some other books I was reading that basically said there was only one redactor, and he had a very good, convincing case. So contra Friedman, there are alternate ways to look at it. So.
You know, I was listening to a course on. It was like a Yale course on the Hebrew Bible. And the teacher, the professors talked about how apparently, according to her anyway, I guess the documentary hypothesis has kind of fallen out of fashion. Have you guys heard, as far as mainstream scholarship, is that true? I didn't think that was true.
Yeah, there is like a reaction to it. Mainly, it's coming surprisingly from minimalist scholars. They're taking archaeological approach, and so they're looking at things differently. They're kind of what they're revolting against is that people like Wellhausen and them put too much anthropological or glean too much anthropological information out of source criticism, which was why people like Gunkel came along with this school of religions movement and replaced source criticism with form criticism, where they talk about the Sitz and Laban and things like that. So, so that there's this evolution away from source criticism into redaction criticism, and now modern things, post-modern types of genre criticism and stuff like that would be one example. And then there's the minimalist school, which takes a wholly different approach and tries to only stick with what they can glean archaeologically, and then try to look at the texts from that perspective. And then they tend to see the texts more as a unity or as sources, but broken along different lines. For instance, the Toledoth structure. You know, these are the generations of the Earth, of Adam, of Seth, and all these different Toledoths. For some of the minimalists, that's more important as how the sources should be broken down. So
based off of those.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a variety of schools with alternate theories as to how to look at the text. So
yeah, I asked Dr. Price a question on this a while ago because I was reading some of the opinions of scholars that had come after Wellhausen, talking about his documentary hypothesis, and they were saying that there were a couple of growingly the acceptance of other theories, like the supplementary hypothesis. I think was one where you start out with a single original book, and then you'd have later on you'd have additions and redaction and stuff like that. And then another one was the fragmentary, where basically you just have a whole slew of different works that were eventually brought together, which I guess is, I don't know exactly how that differs from documentary hypothesis, because that's essentially the same thing. You have JEDP, and then eventually they're all brought together and then redacted. or redacted during that, before they were brought together, I guess. Is there any definitive view on that? Was it redacted after all the sources were brought together, or were they all redacted independently? Or do we know?
Well, like take Friedman, for instance, which is something I'm familiar with because of all, recently dealing with his books and stuff. There was a J.E. redactor, and chronologically coming before the others. And then there was somebody that the J.E. P redactor, and then there's a couple other ones. So he's multiplying redactors, which is one of the criticisms of his work. Because I think you can go overboard by saying, okay, if this doesn't fit, it must have been redaction. So that's an easy trap to fall into.
Yeah. I guess as far as I remember reading, I guess the fragmentary hypothesis was more that it was even more fragmented than just having the four main sources. That all these, it seems to me like you'd have fragmentary hypothesis where you'd have tons of different stories. Maybe this was even back when the original verbal stuff started getting written down. You have a bunch of different of these stories all written down, and then as the sources started to form, like JEDP, or J, I guess, was one of the earliest sources, right?
Yeah, supposedly. Kind of like a plate tectonics theory of gradual accretion of smaller chunks eventually forming larger and larger sections.
Exactly. So I guess the fragmentary hypothesis seems like maybe that would be a really early stage before you even get to the J source, you know what I mean? But I don't know, I haven't read that much about it. And one of the problems I was having is I haven't found any books written on either of those alternative hypotheses to Wellhausen's basic documentary hypothesis, even though I'm really interested to know like what their arguments are and kind of compare them to the standard JEDP documentary hypothesis.
Yeah, I don't have it in any one place, but I could go through several books and glean out all the different splinter groups. You have Wellhausen, and then there was a reaction to him. There was his school, other side schools that were related. Then there's other parallel type of scholarships. So I could probably compile some kind of list and post it. So
yeah, that'd be great, because I couldn't find anything that was specifically just focused on. I mean, because there's a ton of books that just focus on the Wellhausen documentary hypothesis, basically, but I couldn't find any that just took up the fragmentary or the supplementary and just focused on that.
Right. Yeah, you would have to probably have some kind of source that a book or something that would go into it quite in depth. that goes through the entire history.
Yeah.
I think that one that I mentioned to you before by Joel S. Baden, The Composition of the Pentateuch. Hold on a second.
Oh, that would be one where he kind of goes over the history of these theories.
Yeah. Let me double check that because I'm not absolutely sure. There might have been. I had something else by him as well, and that might actually have gone into it. But let me double check.
Yeah, The Composition of the Pentateuch, renewing the documentary hypothesis.
Yeah, and that's where he kind of.
Oh, that was in the Anchor Bible, by the way.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he goes into some, not directly, specifically against Friedman, but yeah, you can tell that he's reacting to the multiple redactors and that kind of stuff. Keeping to the basic, going back to kind of like the basic traditional source critical views, but adding at least one redactor. So, whereas you might read an Eisfeld where you can't find really any redactor,
yeah.
It's all just the sources at some point brought together, and I don't think he really goes. I think his view is that basically they're being preserved as it is, without much change. So
But aren't there just really strong signs of some kind of different redactional stages within and between all the
Yeah.
sources? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that after reading various things, I do like the more minimal approach of Baden, to where it's, to me, Friedman goes a little bit overboard, just like some of the source critics went overboard with all the atomistic sources that they ended up coming with.
Yeah.
Down to the word. Now, I was going to just pop up some of the PDFs from the scan of that Eisfeld book for you, but since you have it, I'll just go ahead and forgo that for now.
Oh, okay, yeah, I just got it.
Yeah. So
Even
it's
though
easy,
it's Rent
easy to,
Thunder. Oh.
yeah, it's easy to find. I think if you just scan the contents, you'll be able to spot exactly where it goes into the method, and mostly the method. For the first part he talks about is the obvious, the different names of God. And it gives a little bit of background of how, that was first recognized, how, it was refined because obviously it didn't apply across the board because it changed in the e-source in Exodus. So, and then he goes into the other things, the linguistic information. So there's like basically four main pillars of the Wellhausen school, how they basically came up with their source divisions. And
Yeah.
of course, each one of those were applied by other scholars and came to different results, and then other scholars forewent the entire methodology and replaced it with other things. So.
There was something I was reading too, and this is part of my question from a long time ago, and Dr. Price did address it really well, but I thought it was an interesting view. One of the scholars, R.N. Wybray, I'll just read from the Wikipedia where I got this. It says, Wybray argued that of the three possible models, that would be the documentary, supplementary, and fragmentary hypotheses. The documentary was the most difficult to demonstrate, for while the supplemental and fragmentary models proposed relatively simple logical processes and could account for the unevenness in the final text, the process envisaged by the documentary hypothesis was both complex and extremely specific in its assumptions, which is reminding me of what you're saying about Friedman, about ancient Israel and the development of its religion. And then it says, Wybray went on to assert that these assumptions were logical and contradictory and did not offer real explanatory power. Why, for example, should the authors of the separate sources avoid duplication while the final redactor accepted it? And then it quotes him. Thus, the hypothesis can only be maintained on the assumption that while consistency was the hallmark of the various source documents, inconsistency was the hallmark of the redactors. So in other words, you bring the sources together and then the redactors just ignore all the doublets and triplets and contradictions and stuff like that, which, I don't know if that's a really great objection, because by that time you could easily, they're considering it scripture, so maybe but then again, that's always one of the things with redaction, like if they're considering it scripture but they're willing to edit it, why would they say, oh, we can't take this out, it's scripture, but we're going to add stuff here and we're going to take this out? You know what I mean?
Yeah, the theory doesn't seem consistent. It's making special exceptions for things in order to make it fit, Yeah, I would have problems with that. Yeah, it's not the book, actually. It's his dissertation. Now, that's downloadable free from the internet, but since I just happen to have it, I was going to go ahead and see if I could throw it to Google Docs and see if you can get it.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think? What do you think?
Throw it in the Google Drive thing right here. And then
yeah, Google Drive.
Right from here. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me.
Yeah, that'd be great. There was another, not to change the subject, but there was another scholar's dissertation that Dr. Price always raves about. It wasn't him, obviously. It was someone else. It was in regards to the New Testament. Jesus' death as saving event or something like that. I always forget the guy's name. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, this
Yeah,
PDF is
Sam
about
K.
10.
Williams. Yeah, it was his dissertation. Okay, that's who it was. Sorry, I was just going off on a tangent there.
Yeah, because of the college that I'm enrolled in, I have access to a specific, I think it's EBSCOhost, their entire thesis collection. So a lot of stuff that you can't get generally on the internet, I can find for you. So if there's something,
Well, that'd be great because
Yes.
this copy of this dissertation on Amazon is for a used copy is $150.
oh, yeah, send me the. You can email me because you have my email address.
Yeah.
Send me the information and I'll see if I can access it.
Okay. Awesome. And who was?
I don't have everything.
No. So Joel S. Bott, and that was the dissertation you're talking about, right?
Yeah, it's called Rethinking the Supposed JE Document, but it gives quite a bit, a scholar-by-scholar breakdown of the evolution of the early source critical movement. So it's very informative. As short as it is, it's packed full of information. And it has a very interesting thesis, so I think you'll enjoy it. It's a quick read. The PDF is only like 10 megabyte, 10.5 meg. So
I had another book recommended to me by someone else who I know through the internet. Since we're on the topic of the Old Testament and connections with Canaanite myths and stuff like that, and he said it was a really good introductory for like newbie geeks like me. So I'll probably pick it up. But it was it's called the Gilgamesh Epic and Old Testament Parallels, and it's by Alexander Heidel, and he highly recommended it. So I'm sure a lot of you and Reuben, you guys are already really well versed on that stuff, but for any beginner geeks like me, I gotta get up to speed. So he said that was the perfect book for if you just need to kind of get into it.
sounds like something I need to read. Because there's big gaping holes in my knowledge, I know. So I've got the, oh my goodness, the cats are at it again. They're really feisty tonight. Okay, I've got the PDF uploaded to the Hangout to Google Drive, so I don't know how you would access that. I'm seeing it on screen, so I don't know if I have to do
Yeah,
something.
I just click Google Drive, and then where did I go? Yeah, rethinking the.
Oh,
See, this always happens.
now
I
you can
click on
download
it and it doesn't open.
Okay, but can you download it? There's a download
No,
button.
I can. I can see it. I click on it. It has a PDF thing, rethinking the whatever that says. Sue. All it says is Sue, and then an ellipses. And I click on it, and it won't open.
Really? Because when I'm showing it, it's showing that on the left pane, and then the actual open document in a larger right pane. Then it's got several buttons of print, download, and more actions button, stuff like that. Zoom.
I think
So
maybe
why
you
that
have to
doesn't-
do one more step to get it to where I can grab it.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Reuben, do you know exactly how that works? Because I often have this problem. But then when I'm often in Hangouts with another person named Nadia, and she puts stuff up on Google Drive all the time, and I can always grab it, no problem. So I'm thinking she's doing an extra step. I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on this stuff.
Yeah, like maybe it's not, the permissions or something are not set on it or something.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, but I never have that problem when she's uploading stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it is on my end. I'm not sure. Maybe that's just coincidence.
Yeah, I have ad block for Chrome. Okay. Well, I can turn it off, I would imagine. Oops, not that button, John. Just about ready to translate the whole page into English. Okay, let's see if I can do anything with this here.
Okay.
Did I shut it down or just pause it? Should I pause mine or just disable it or what? I'm wondering. Okay, I tried pausing.
Yeah, nothing happened for me. I shut both of mine down and nothing changed.
Okay. I'd have to go into settings and deactivate it. That shouldn't take but a second.
Yeah, I've never done that before. Usually it just works. Like I click on it and the document
Yeah.
itself pops up and I can read it, and then there's a little save button up there. But for some
Well,
reason,
I'm
it seems
thinking
like half the time it doesn't give me that option.
maybe I should create
Oops, I
like
didn't
a
mean no open
public
caption,
folder.
sorry.
I should create a public folder and then upload it specifically to that folder, because then it's already shared as public, so maybe that'll help. Oh, did you check out the documents on those videos that I put up to Google Drive?
I kind of perused them, but I
Oh,
haven't really looked into them in really
but you
detail
could
yet.
open those, okay? Those
Yeah, I
were
got those, yep.
okay. Yeah, because I created a folder with public access permissions, but with only people with a link to the folder, so
Oh,
you
it's
can't just
the
find.
same folder?
No, different one. This one I
Okay.
just uploaded to wherever, I think. I could try doing that and uploading it to a different place. So.
Yeah, maybe try that, because I can't figure out what's going wrong with this thing. Let me just try and reopen Google Drive.
Oh, I actually removed it. So it's not there anymore.
Google.
Okay, let me try this again.
Google Drive.
Let's try yeah, there's a Hangout shared folder. What are the permissions on that? I wonder. Yeah, that still has the sources of the hex took in there. Yeah, I don't see any way to change any permissions from this interface. Yeah, you would think that if it automatically created a Hangout shared folder, that it would have the necessary permissions automatically. So if you put anything in it, it should be available to the Hangout. You know, that's weird. We need a Hangout expert.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, if you don't mind, just do what we did last time.
Yeah, I'm just going to drop it in the other folder.
Okay.
That will
You can even
take
put
but
it
a
in that
sec.
same evolution folder, and then I can just grab it out of there.
Yeah, that'll work.
Because I already have the link to that one from your email.
Alrighty. Yeah, it won't take just but a second. The rest of the year, you're shit out of luck. So. Unless everybody was acting except Doug, and all of a sudden I just removed it, so that messed everybody up. Okay, in she goes. Yeah, should take just a couple minutes to upload at my 150 baud upload speed, like the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the first modem I had was 150 baud. I didn't hit. To me, it was a big deal to be able to afford a 300 baud modem. So, you know, we're talking a long time ago. 2010, somewhere around there.
You know, I may have deleted your email after I grabbed that document.
Oh, yeah?
I'm looking right now and I don't
I could
see it.
resend it. I don't send out a lot of emails, so it doesn't take me long to find anything. I get a lot of email, but I don't really send out a lot.
Yeah, I deleted it, I think.
Oh, okay.
Oopsie.
Was that the one that was sent by Google Drive when I shared it, probably? So I probably
Yeah.
don't even have a copy of that. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I do think I remember the...
Well, I'll be right back. I have to use the restroom.
Sure. I'll sing you a song while we wait. Maybe I should put it on mute, then sing a song.
I have returned.
Yeah, now that you mention it, I gotta go.
Uh-oh.
So you could sit here in silence like I was. Well, actually, I was singing on mute, so people that weren't tortured to death. I'll be back in a minute.
My sister got a new car.
So I was thinking maybe we should go off live, huh?
Yeah, if you want to. I mean, I think you and I are the only ones in here who are actually talking.
Yeah, how come? Why is that? Everybody have technical
Good
issues?
question. I think they're just shy.
I know some of them, and I know they're not shy. Looks like Ruben's got them all on mute, though.
On Chaos Radio.
Oh, I'd listen to Chaos Radio. What the hey?
So both those Richard Elliot Friedman you'll recommend, who wrote the Bible with Sources Revealed.
Yeah, I'd recommend it because there's a lot of good information there, but I'm sure that you'll probably find yourself not agreeing with everything, which is good. You know, you wanna at least
Be familiar with everything.
Yeah, give the scholar a chance to make his point, and then you could go with it however you want after that. But my problem with a lot of these scholars is what I call they're too much of being biblicists, that they take too much of the Bible at face value and run with it when they should be a little bit more critical, and maybe rethink some of the assumptions. So.
Yeah. Well, that's something that Dr. Price complains about a lot in modern New Testament scholarship. They just have these holdover assumptions about things that they can't seem to break free of.
I asked Dr. Price a question once. I said, what do you think of this, Dr. Price? Margaret Barker, and I know he's he likes her a lot. I guess they're fairly close. And I said, what would be her reaction if I was to submit that she was too much of a biblicist and that her ideas about First Temple Judaism becoming subsumed into the culture of the people of the land and then resurfacing as Christianity. So the kingship kind of theology went underground and then later manifested itself in fed into Christianity. What if we're not dealing with First Temple theology, but rather Canaanite paganism? And I asked him that question in an email 3 times, and he never responded to it. And I don't know. I don't think it was because he lost it. I just don't think he wanted to go there.
Maybe he was afraid you'd actually send her that email.
Maybe, or he didn't want to say anything in the podcast, one way or the other on that issue. Maybe just wanted it to go away.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, surely she must be aware of, that viewpoint, don't you think?
Yeah, but if you read, like, say, The Great Angel, she goes to a lot of lengths to describe and validate everything in the Old Testament that deals with the pre-exilic period as if it was absolutely historical, and that's why
Oh,
that's what I mean by biblicists.
okay, yeah.
And the same as with Friedman, he takes that stuff as if it's, pretty historical for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of amazing that people just assume that especially the really old Hebrew Bible stuff is just, oh yeah, it's history. Like, yeah, why on earth would you just assume that, especially given that so much of it has such a clearly mythical character, you know?
What's the link that Reuben posted?
He made a meme about your cat.
Oh. An inferior non-alien race, eh? Okay. Yeah, I made one of those memes of that ancient aliens guy with the freaky hair.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's Reuben Goldstein, but it's Reuben Goldstein. But it didn't last. It got replaced by something else. I guess it wasn't up to their meme standards on that website, and it just disappeared.
Oh, okay.
So the link I posted to Facebook was replaced by a different meme that somebody else concocted.
Oh, there's your meme right there.
Yeah, I couldn't figure out how to access it anymore.
Giorgio Tsoukalos, I think, is that guy's name.
Yeah, I can't remember what his name is.
Yeah, Giorgio Tsoukalos.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, that guy's a trip.
Yeah.
And, I was like on, I don't know, History 2 or something like that, and they were doing a bunch of stuff. And he's all over the place now. He's not just with aliens. He's making connections to all kinds of stuff. I mean, he's really branching out.
All those guys, man. Him and I forget all their names, but some of those guys, Ancient Aliens guys, and
Is it like Stratman, Stanford, something last name? One of the guys' name?
no, I think his first name is David. But yeah, they have some really out there theories about aliens.
Yeah, I was really into that stuff in the 70s. Wasn't
Who's that big name guy? You'll know it if you say it. Girl. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of his books, but there were some really, really way out there books in the 70s too that kind of were spawned from that I just thought were just great because they were so outlandish. There was one I remember was talking about some guy who had actually come upon an alien in a coffin somewhere in Tibet or something, as if it really happened. And I'm, where is this? Where is it written? Where is the sources for this stuff? It's just like the most outlandish stuff you could possibly imagine was being presented as being absolutely true.
Yeah, I have a theory that their evidence came from doing a lot of hallucinogens.
Yeah.
Because all those guys are into hallucinogens big time.
I think that's why I started doing hallucinogens too. After.
Yeah, you get access to sources that no one else has access to.
Yeah, and I was big on the end time stuff too. What's weird is that it was at the same time as Dr. Price because this stuff came out at the same time, but I was 6 years younger than him when he was getting into that stuff. So there's a lot of parallels between our lives, although you have to just add 6 years onto me to arrive at Dr. Price, I think.
Yeah, you're talking about like biblical eschatology or just end times in general?
Well, like the original book that started all the late great planet Earth.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that was a good one. And there was a lot of books that were spawned from that. And each one had to update its central characters, as political things actually changed in the real world. So, and now
Yeah.
there was something posted to one of the groups on Facebook. I can't remember now which one it was, but it was a link to some kind of end time scenario. And now it's like, instead of the Russians and the Red Chinese, it's now the Arabs and terrorists and all kinds of stuff. So it gets updated as the political shifting of things change. It's interesting to watch it as a cultural phenomenon, anyway. Yeah, I was really intrigued by that YouTube series. If you get a chance to watch it, because
Decoding the Bible. That one.
yeah,
It struck me as kind of bizarre. The first one, anyway. Almost like numerological, or kind of
yeah, and then he
secret
ends up getting
codes.
away from it completely. It's like the more he thought about it, the more he got into it, the more he realized that he was just sinking into a
Fooling
swamp.
himself.
Yeah.
So he starts out on a quest to decode the Bible, and then by the end of it, he's just like, "This is silly." Is that what you're saying?
Well, he does think he's cracked a lot of the allegories, but he just basically ignores the numerology. Although what he said about astro-theology, for the first time, really kind of made sense to me. So that's a good section to take a look at, because it seems like you could almost theorize that there was some kind of mystery cult going on that originally had some kind of dying and rising god, and there was various signs like eclipses and volcanoes erupting and the destruction of Jerusalem, which were all taken by this group to signal certain events. And I don't know if this group fed into Christianity or it was a dead branch or something or whatever, or they were actually mutated into Christians at some point. Hard to say, but they did leave a legacy, and that was parts of Revelation as their literature.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I would, when I'm going through that, I'm picking and choosing stuff that I think makes sense and stuff that doesn't. Like, I disagreed with his assignment of the kings, of the emperors of Rome, to the 6 seals of Revelation 6. And I thought he was on the right track, and then he seemed to get off track and then went into a totally different way and came up with a totally different conclusion. I think if he would have stuck with his original instincts, I think he would have probably came to the same conclusion as I did. But, all this stuff, they've been interpreting this stuff for 2,000 years, and everybody thinks that their interpretation is the right one. So, I
That's
don't
what
want
happens when you have.
to...
That's what happens when you have prophecy that's so vague. I mean, you can just take it
Right.
any way you want to take it.
Yeah, because maybe that the 7 beasts or whatever has nothing to do with Roman emperors.
Yeah,
A lot of people thought so.
that one I think is a pretty good allegory, though.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, and he wasn't the first to think of it. Others have thought.
No, that's been around for a long time. Yeah.
But I just think that it makes more sense if you exclude Julius Caesar, who was not an emperor, never a king, and start with Augustus. Because what I was getting at is that the big problem this group had was not Rome or the kings per se. It was the imperial cult, the deification of these human emperors, and that was like very blasphemous to this group that obviously had Jewish origins. So that's the big thing. That's the beast, really. If you want to nail it down, it's the blasphemy of deifying humans. And it's just that, the big thing is Nero. Most people assume that the beast is Nero, and I thought, well, if you're thinking still in Christian terms, maybe, but if you're thinking in purely Jewish terms, and if this is a Jewish or proto-Jewish Christian work or Messianic Jewish work, that the real problem they would have would be with Vespasian, because he's the one that initiated the actual attack on Rome. Of course, the war actually started. Yeah, it started under Nero, but he was the one that actually attacked it, then got recalled to Rome because of the death of Nero, and then he sent Titus to finish the job. And I'm thinking, okay, that makes sense for him to be the worst beast. So he's beast number 6, And then Titus is the one that only ruled for a short time, because his rule was only 2 years, 3 months, or something like that. So the writer of this particular part of Revelation was aware that he had reigned for a short time. And then, so we're talking sometime in the reign of Domitian, probably, in the aftermath of the Jewish War, when that section was done. And the rest should be not taken literally. Well, he tries to apply the 10 kings to the dynasties that follow. And I think he did 2 different versions of it. I think that should tell you that this is a waste of time. It's allegory. It's written from the perspective of the end of the Jewish War and Domitian. They don't know anything about any kings yet that followed. Other parts of Revelation do, obviously, because it's written from a later perspective. But if you're just looking at Revelation 6 and 13 and 17, where it talks specifically about the beast, I think that was all of a piece from this particular group. And it only goes as far as the aftermath of the 70 AD war. And the rest is allegory. They're trying to apply previous history and extrapolate and prognosticate into the future. And basically what they're saying is that, however it cuts, how many ever emperors come after that, it's going to be the same thing. What's happened before is going to happen again. Rome is not going to repent. But immediately after the 6 seals is when you get into the actual final Armageddon war in earnest, and the trumpets and all that stuff. So basically, they're looking at it as, okay, the final sign is the destruction of Jerusalem. Now we're on our way to the end of the world. Okay, and whatever happens in Rome, it's going to be, they're going to not repent, no matter what happens to them, the plagues and stuff, and the famines, and it says they don't repent. They still can carry on with their ways. So they're making predictions about what's going to happen, and what they assume would happen. And what they're assuming is happening is going to be the final battle of Armageddon. Well, that didn't happen, and this stuff was readapted by Christian redaction and interpolation over time, and by groups that were probably aware of other things. But one thing that I have a problem with is trying to put Christianity early into Rome. For instance, Nero's persecution of Christians, as blaming them for starting the fire of Rome. That's debatable. Historians debate whether that he had actually blamed the Christians or not. And my theory is there weren't really any Christians there per se. There might have been Messianic Jewish cults or something like that present. And then in the reign of Claudius, they mentioned Chrestus. I think that was from, is that Tacitus? No, Tacitus did the Nero thing. And I think Suetonius did the that Claudius expelled Jews under the instigation of Chrestus.
That was
Suetonius? Yeah, I think it was. Or maybe it wasn't. Tacitus.
I thought it was.
I get those guys mixed up.
Pliny or something.
It could have been.
I thought Pliny talked about
yeah, maybe.
Christus, the guy that was causing the riots.
Yeah, and most scholars say that is a reference to Christians. I would dispute that, because Chrestus and Christos, there is similarity, but there could have been, that could have been the original group. They were Christians that eventually became assimilated somehow into Christianity or something. So then we've got no Christians at the time of Claudius. Then we get to the period of Domitian, who scholars pretty much are already now coming to the conclusion that the persecution of Christians under Domitian was a total fabrication. They're beginning to accept that. So now we have no Christians in Rome during that period of those emperors, the Julian Claudian dynasty through the Flavians. And I was going to equate Vespasian with the beast, the second beast as Titus, and then the one that has not yet come, which is just obfuscation. They're very well aware that Domitian is the emperor. But because Domitian deified and reinstituted the imperial cult, that's why there's that equation with the sixth beast, which is usually taken as Nero, but what I'm saying is Vespasian, with like a redivivus, a revival of the beast. So now you've got Domitian, who is now, once again, after a kind of a lull. Vespasian and Titus really didn't emphasize the imperial cult, but Domitian reinstituted it and built temples to the deified Vespasian and Titus. So that's what I'm saying, is that, you know, you can identify the sixth beast, the fatal head wound, which I think is probably not a reference to any physical kind of thing. The fatal head wound was caused at the hand of a sword in another section of Revelation, which I'm thinking is kind of like the reference to where he was actually defeated and that they had to regroup with under Titus. So there was a period where Vespasian was trying to take the Levant and failed. The rebels actually were successful, and there was a period of time where they weren't under direct siege, and then Titus came in and actually completed the job. So I'm thinking maybe that reference was to the death of Nero, or the fact that he had suffered a defeat, a military defeat. So I'm not sure exactly which one of those interpretations might work, but it's just there. You know, this is all came from just watching the videos a couple times, and the second time through, after being intrigued by them, just taking a few notes and then eventually typing them up. So I didn't really put much effort into it, but I thought my scheme worked a little bit better because, A, it eliminates Julius Caesar as the first one, so that puts Augustus as the first seal. And then the economic troubles under Caligula match up better with the scales, and they're talking, because it sounds like they're talking about inflation. And there was, you know, Tiberius was a prosperous reign, but it was like the 90s IT bubble. You know,
Right.
It burst in Caligula's reign, and so he had to figure out ways to confiscate the landed property owners and stuff for their wealth in order to finance his extravagances and pay the debts that ended up being mounted up. So I thought that instead of being applied to Tiberius like Zoroaster was, that better fit Caligula. And then mentioning a sickly pale horse kind of reminded me of Claudius being physically a sickly person, so that might have been a reference to that. So those are lining up for me better. But
Yeah,
then
that's
he comes to
interesting.
Nero. Yeah, and he rejects the numerology. He did a bunch of things about 666 and 616 and which one is the right one and all that stuff. Or maybe I should be looking at the Greek numbers or something. And then he came to the conclusion, he goes, all that's worthless. I'm not even going to deal with that anymore. Just consider everything I said about numerology to be totally worthless. And I thought, well, in a way, yeah, it's worthless because it's Christian interpolation. It was an attempt to assign Nero to the sixth beast. So in the NEB, the New English Bible, that whole section is in parentheses. And I thought that that was an insight that the translators had, that not just the number of the beast was interpolation, but that whole thing, where it starts off, you know, this is a mystery, it's a number of a man. He said that, okay, just the part about the actual number was interpolated, but I'm thinking that whole section there, that whole paragraph, or those two sentences were a Christian interpolation trying, once it was established that they were creating the myth that there were Christians in the time of Nero, and a lot earlier than they actually were, that they wanted to further Christianize Revelation by throwing in a reference that seemed to point to Nero, because if, according to like scholars, 666 and 616 both add up to Nero.
Yeah, the Latin form Neron Kaiser and then Nero Kaiser.
Yeah, and I
Greek.
think that was one way I would deal with that identification of the sixth beast with Nero, was to basically just, you know, make an interpolation, conveniently get rid of it. But I didn't think it was totally worthless and you should just throw it away. I thought it actually had some kind of significance. So what did you come up with, Suetonius or Pliny?
Yeah, apparently it was Suetonius, the part about the Jews making disturbances in the under Crestus.
Crestus, you're right.
And then Pliny was talking about he wrote a letter to Trajan, and he was asking, you know, how am I going to punish these Christiani that were causing all the trouble? And they were worshiping a Christos or Christo as their god, you know.
Yeah, so there's a lot of doubt, I think, cast on any kind of Christianity that we recognize as such as existing in Rome at that time. I think that was all added.
Really?
Or
Well,
reinterpretation, because like in Sinaitic Atticus manuscripts, it originally said Christos and things like that. It was spelled as eta iota, and you can see that they had actually changed it just to an iota consistently throughout the entire manuscript. So that was the original spelling. So I'm thinking, yeah, that was the original spelling in Suetonius, things like that. That they were corrected to Christiana or whatever it was.
well, then what would you say Suetonius and Pliny? Who were they talking about? Who were these Christiani?
Well, that's something I have to really reconsider, because after I started watching the later parts about the Astro-theology, I think he's also wrong in saying, well, he's right in what he's talking about, that some of the initial signs that made this group really take off, and it was some kind of, I think, who said this? Was it Suetonius also said this? They called it a vile superstition, which is an interesting way of describing a religion such as Christianity. It sounds more like they're talking about a cult, some kind of weird cult. And I think what the impetus of this cult was the eclipse of AD 29, because both the eclipse of AD 29, which I think he rightly points out is being considered as the birth of this god, and that's where the revelation about the woman that gives birth in the desert, those are all astrological, and nobody denies this astrological imagery in that. He applies it to an eclipse, and you can see how it would line up. The events of the eclipse might be symbolically represented in the birth of this savior god. But it's the only eclipse that passes through Syria, close to Egypt, where there's a total eclipse there. And he's putting other eclipses like the one in 39 and one in 59. Those are further north or south. The actual full eclipse would have been nowhere near the Middle East. They would be in other locations. So I'm thinking AD 29, the birth of this Crestus, possibly, if you want to call him that. AD 59, exactly 30 years later, another eclipse which is taken to be the death and resurrection of this god. The death being the eclipse, and then the resurrection being the aftermath of the eclipse, because of the other constellation and stars that were in the sky at the time. So they're interpreting not only they're interpreting the eclipses in the context of the sky, the stellar configurations at the time, taking these as signs, the final sign being the destruction of Jerusalem. So what they're doing is they're saying, our God was born 29 AD, died and resurrected 59 AD. Those two were eclipses. Those were the signs. It's the end times. The next big sign is the destruction of Jerusalem. That's in Revelation. That's a big kind of thing. That's basically, this is the signal for Armageddon, time to go. So that's what I think we're dealing with, is some kind of cult that was very much influenced by its Jewish roots, but also had a lot of connections to astro-theological interpretations of things. Maybe there was a lot of Persian influence in their thinking.
So, are you saying that? Sorry, go ahead.
Crestus that they're talking about be related to the deity that Marcion was talking about?
Yeah, I think they are related. I think these were like early strands, possibly, that fed into a lot of different aspects of emergent Christianities, and there were a whole bunch of different ones.
Yeah, it makes me wonder. I mean, I don't see it as that implausible that there would have been Christians at the time in that area that were possibly causing trouble. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they just referred to them with that different spelling, or I don't know.
Well, I was reading something by Frank Zindler where he's talking about there was a major shift throughout the entire empire, where almost every eta or epsilon became an I just across the board. For some reason, everybody just eliminated the distinction and started writing I's. So he kind of basically was hinting around that a lot of the transformation of Jesus was facilitated by this linguistic shift. That, now that they're spelling Christus and Christiani, Anoi, with an I as Christianoi, that made it kind of easier for them to historicize the Jesus myth. So it's interesting.
Yeah, Reuven brought up a cool thing that Acharya has written about. He said there were also Serapis followers in Anatolia and Rome that were called Christians, which is probably what Tacitus and Pliny are talking about. And then from this article, there's a writing from Hadrian where he says, Hadrian says, the worshippers of Serapis are Christians and they are devoted to the god Serapis, who call themselves the bishops of Christ. There is no ruler of a Jewish synagogue, no Samaritan, no presbyter of the Christians who is not either an astrologer, a soothsayer, or a minister to obscene pleasures. The very patriarch himself, should he come into Egypt, would be required by some to worship Serapis and by others to worship Christ. They have, however, but one God, and it is one and the self-same whom Christians, Jews, and Gentiles alike adore: money.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for some of that information. That's really, really helpful, because there's a lot of this stuff is just intuitions that I'm just popping into my head, and I don't always have all the facts, in my head all the time. I'm not like a Dr. Price that can remember all this crap at once.
Well, the thing is, like, everyone's kind of speculating on some of this stuff. We don't really know for sure. Everyone's just trying to make the clearest picture possible that can explain it in the most efficient way with the least amount of, ad hoc assumptions.
Right.
Yeah, and then she says, this is Acharya, commenting on that snippet from Hadrian's writing. It is thus possible that the Christos, or anointed God, Pliny's Christiani were following, was Serapis himself, the syncretic deity created by the priesthood in the 3rd century BCE. In any case, this god Christos was not a man who had been crucified in Judea.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of discussion in scholarly circles that one of the big problems they had with a lot of these cults was that they had no roots. They were too new. They had no foundation in ancient religions and stuff. They just seemed to pop up. And that would be a good reason why Suetonius would refer to even Serapis as a superstition, because it was as you said, it was a synchronistic god, and it was relatively new. It was created specifically for a purpose, and that would explain why there's no way that they could be referring to anything resembling what we would consider Christianity at that time in that place.
Now, then she makes a connection to Osiris. Moreover, like his earlier incarnation Osiris, Serapis, both popular gods in the Roman Empire, was called not only Christos but also Krestos, centuries before the Common Era. Indeed, Osiris was styled Krestos centuries before his Jewish copycat Jesus was ever conceived. Is that true? I've never heard that connection before between Serapis and being called Krestos.
No, that's news to me, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I wonder where she's getting that from. I'd never heard that.
She's got 28 footnotes on that. So.
That would be huge if that. I mean, because the parallels between Osiris and Jesus are pretty undeniable anyway in a lot of cases. So if he was called Krestos, man, that would be really quite a thing.
Now that you mentioned, I might have actually read that, but it just went. Didn't even sink in probably at the time.
Yeah, unfortunately, she's not citing any source here.
Well, that's unusual.
Osiris Krestos. Okay. Yeah, nothing's popping up right away. There's a lot of stuff about Suetonius mentioning Crestus, but no one's talking about Osiris in connection to... Oh, hold on. The title Crestus was also used to refer to gods themselves. There is, for example, evidence that the Egyptian sun god Osiris was called Crestus, whilst the word Crestus can be seen on a Mithraic relief in the Vatican. Mithras was a sun god popular in Rome around the time of Jesus, blah, 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 including his birthday of December 25th. Okay, so they're going off that BS stuff. And again, no source.
It's probably
And the fact that they mentioned the December 25th thing in connection with Mithras is a little worrisome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might actually ask Dr. Price about that as a Bible Geek question, if he knows of any sources that connected the title Crestos with Osiris, because man, that would be really huge.
Yeah, that's almost a smoking gun.
Oh, I mean, yeah, potentially. I mean, because there's already parallels without even calling him Crestos, you know.
Doggone it, I mentioned smoking. Now I gotta go home. I'm getting tired of talking, man.
Yeah, if Ruben wants to, he can take this off live, whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, let me take a short break.
Okay.